Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. I actually really enjoyed what I did last time where I used the ephemera to scrapbook in this journal and then I read the letter on a voiceover over it. So I think I'm going to do that in this video as well. We have letter numbers 6 and 7 here and I hope you enjoy. Near the end of the video I also unwrapped letter number 8, but I think I'm gonna save that letter for the next series because I kind of got tired. Now let's begin. May 13, 1884. Dear Mr. Hickman, after all the kindness you have shown me, I'm honored to grant your request of exchanging letters. It's the very least I can do to show my gratitude. If I can bring you even the slightest bit of comfort, information, or amusement through our correspondence, I am very pleased to do it. Your friend Miss Lottie visited me just as you said she would. Miss Lottie and her ladies are quite the bunch, aren't they? Thank you for arranging everything. Oh, and Miss Lottie begged me to apologize for not keeping her word to you about bringing back my wedding gown. She said every one of her ladies insisted on trying it on at least once before she could return it. Apparently, they've never seen, quote, fine city sewing, unquote, before. In case you're worried on my account, don't be. I don't mind them keeping the dress one bit. It may be the finest dress I've ever constructed, but it only reminds me of what a greenhorn I was coming out here to marry a perfect stranger in the first place. On the bright side, it's a free advertising at its best for my dress boutique, so I have no intention of asking for it back anytime soon. After a few weeks under Miss Lottie's employ, I've grown quite fond of our mutual friend. She is jolly and generous, and her creative energy is abundant, to say the least, even if, between you and me, it should be restrained, ever so slightly, simply for taste's sake. However, she seems to have an inexhaustible fortune at her disposal for funding her vaudeville shows. She has offered me the regular work creating the costumery for her ladies at Le Petit Chateau Versailles. She said she changes themes quarterly and has been dying to create a Rocco-themed show for her ladies to perform. Since I'm, quote, the best dressmaker capable of doing her grand vision justice, unquote, she's ready to spare no expense to see it done. I fully intend to have my hands full the next few months fitting up each girl in her very own Rocco-inspired can-can dress. Have you ever seen one of Miss Lottie's shows, Mr. Hickman? I hear they are extravagant but not too terribly vulgar. Even the respectable people of Frisco attend them. I've seen her posters all over town and in the town crier, and I think, as vaudeville shows go, hers are quite harmless. My mama loved theater of any kind. She would have loved working on Miss Lottie's show. It's times like these I miss her terribly, especially when I'm so far away from my sister. My mother was a very kind, practical, and wise woman. While some would look down on my working for Miss Lottie, Mama likely would have said something like, Lil, my lass, a girl has got to eat. As long as you steer clear of folly and stay right before the Lord, there's no harm in having a bit of fun now and then. And let me tell you, Mr. Hickman, I am having a great deal of fun realizing Miss Lottie's vision. Thank you again for helping me find the work that will eventually bring Katie and me together again. I'm not such a novice that I don't know the vast array of less desirable work I could have been forced into under the circumstances. I am entirely in your debt. And as it stands, this isn't all I have to thank you for. Your assistance has led to a respectable place to live as well. One of Miss Lottie's ladies introduced me to her cousins Esther and Abigail DeMille. Their family runs a boarding house just past the charcoal kilns on the edge of town. Outside of private residences, it seems to be the only truly respectable establishment in all of Frisco. The DeMilles are a Mormon family, so imagine my surprise when I learned that Mr. DeMille only has one wife. From all the talk in the papers and the rumors one hears about Utah, one would think he'd have at least 7. I've made great friends with Esther and Abigail. They're both grand, lovely, strong-minded girls. At present, I teach them sewing in exchange for room and board. Their father is keen on them being as independent as possible and is especially anxious they are always able to provide for themselves and their families should the need arise. I like that about him. There's precious little work of a respectable nature for a woman to do and actually support herself. Mr. DeMille is a surprisingly forward-thinking man where his daughters and women in general are concerned. In fact, he's extremely proud of the fact that the very first woman to vote in all of America was a woman in Salt Lake City. I was under the impression that the first woman to vote came from the Wyoming territory, but Esther showed me proof otherwise. I've concluded the same for you to send to your mother. After discussing her work with the women's rights movement in length with you on the train, I thought she might appreciate it. I still can hardly believe she met Lucretia Mott in person. What a grand treat that must have been. There was a town meeting held last Friday. The DeMilles invited me along since I intend to stay here at least as long as it takes to repay all Mr. Gambit's money. I know you don't think I should have to because he was the one who turned out to be the thief, but I'm afraid I'll be obliged to him until I do. We Moors don't like feeling obliged in general, and particularly to men like Mr. Gambit. In all honesty, I only answered his ad to save my sister. So he may not be the gentleman I believed him to be, but I am not entirely innocent in this debacle either. My Irish pride will allow me to admit that much, at least. As to the town meeting, it was called by the concerned fathers of Frisco. Their complaint was about the various corpses one finds strewn through the streets each morning after the gambling and drinking and pistol whipping are over. It is shocking, you know. The tales of the Wild West may have always thrilled me, but I've only been here a few weeks and already I've encountered more than half a dozen poor, expired souls on my way to Miss Lottie's or to church. By the end of the meeting, any who could afford it had donated money to hire a man in a wagon to go around town and clean up the dead before the children set out for school each morning. They even discussed finally hiring a sheriff from Nevada if things get too bad. I can't help asking myself what their definition of too bad is. How much worse can things possibly get? Standards and whatnot, I suppose. Now, Mr. Hickman, if all I've shared hasn't been enough to enlighten and entertain you, I will now tell you the latest rumor around town, that Frisco has acquired its very own specter. They say it's a woman. She's said to wear white and wander the foothills of Frisco on foggy evenings. Aren't ghost stories deliciously thrilling? I don't believe a stitch of them, of course, but it's always a corker to have a little Mephistophelian chill before bed just to curdle one's blood. No, I am not morbid, Mr. Hickman. I simply relish the keener sensibilities one needs now and then to remind myself that I am alive. And now, my dear benefactor, I would very much like to hear all you wish to share about yourself. I feel I've spent so much of our time together monopolizing the conversation with my woes and need of your assistance. Furthermore, I had no idea you were a Pinkerton until the train robbery, so being of an insatiably curious nature, I would very much like to hear all about how you came to be one. And, of course, any adventures you have chasing the bright stars that you care to pepper your letters with will also be lavishly and repeatedly savored. Oh dear, and speaking of the bright stars, I must apologize to you. Miss Lottie told me that they were the women who helped me that first night in Frisco. How I wish I could have alerted you to their presence and saved you from chasing them all over the territory. In all honesty, I wouldn't have guessed it was them in a million years. They were so lovely, and all three of them were extremely kind to me. They certainly didn't strike me as the murderous thieves their wanted posters around town proclaimed them to be. Then again, I was fooled by Mr. Gambit as well, so I suppose I'm not an entirely credible judge of character. In the meantime, I do hope you are taking great care wherever you are. I was delighted by your gift of the map. I will take an inordinate amount of pleasure keeping track of your travels by it. Until your next letter, I will remain gratefully yours, Miss Lily Clara Moore. So that actually concludes letter number 6 for the reading. And of course there are bits of ephemera, but I'm not going to read those. Here you see me journaling about how I felt about this letter, and above that I had listed the items that came in this envelope. I decided to tear up some of the ad that came along with this letter and glue it to the inside, and I also wanted to go with this vintage ephemera look, so I put some stickers down to do that. Let's move on to letter number 7. This one had multiple pieces to it. There were a few telegrams. There was this advertisement. We also got a postcard. And I thought this letter was more exciting than the last one because I like to see the correspondence in different formats. But I will also begin reading this one. First off, we have a letter from Mr. Hickman to Miss Lily Clara Moore, dated May 30th, 1884. Dear Miss Moore, thank you for your letter. I knew you were something special the moment I saw you giving McDonald's great oath what for back in Chicago. And your latest letter just confirmed it. Since you've agreed to exchange letters with me, I'll do my darndest to supply you with my most interesting adventures during our correspondence. I'm very glad you've been able to find a suitable position with Miss Lottie. She's a fine woman with a heart of gold. I've grown fond of her during my various visits to Frisco. You could say she's the eccentric rich aunt I never had. And you're right, all those girls dancing and singing and whatnot for her would be doing something much less reputable if it wasn't for her and that heart of gold. Many of those girls were destitute orphans or were widows due to mining accidents and the shadier goings on in Frisco. She saved every one of them from taking to the streets, including you, it appears. Not implying that you intended to take to the streets, of course. But I don't think many of the girls that do ever intend to in the first place. As the son of a mother left in dire circumstances when my father passed, I'm much obliged to women like Miss Lottie. I'm glad you found room and board with a Mormon family. They're peculiar, all right, but I had quite a bit of interaction with them during my time as a Texas Ranger. That was before I joined the Pinkertons. Being a lawman, the Mormons have always been suspicious at the start. And who can blame them after what they faced back in Missouri? However, once they've seen them no harm, they usually warm up and are mighty kind and hospitable. So Frisco has a ghost now, you say? Well, how about that? I've heard many a specter story out here in the Western Territory and have seen a few things I can't rightly explain. I'm not saying I believe in ghosts or the like, but if you like your blood chilled now and again, Miss Moore, the Navajo tribe sure has a few stories that'll tickle your spine. I look forward to hearing more about this specter development. Now, you asked me to tell you a bit more about myself. While I'd usually rather dance with a pair of scorpions, I'll oblige in your case, especially since I hope you'll tell me more about yourself in return. I was born and raised in Texas. My daddy was a Texas Ranger and, unfortunately, a careless gambling man. He was a good man, though. Being anti-slavery, he and my 3 older brothers left Texas to go fight for the Union when the rebel states turned. This, and of course my daddy's gambling debts, didn't make Texas a very welcoming place for me and my mama. When I finally turned 16 and could take over paying the debts, Mama moved back to Pennsylvania where her people are. Not too long after that, I got word that my daddy and brothers were all killed in the war. Rather than follow my mama back east, I decided to stay behind and clear up my daddy's debts so they wouldn't follow her back there. The best way to do that was to join up with the Texas Rangers myself. The pay was decent, and with only myself and mama to support, I was able to make some good headway on clearing my daddy's name. I was with the Rangers for a few years back in the 70s. I was part of the posse that helped Armstrong take down John Wesley Hardin and his gang. That's when I met Bill Pinkerton and his father, who'd been hired to go after Hardin by a private party. I guess old Pinkerton saw something in me that he thought would make a pretty good detective, because when Hardin was finally behind bars, he invited me to come work for their agency in Chicago. Unfortunately, I still had a sight of debt left to pay, so I told them I wouldn't go until it was paid off. Pinkerton Sr. offered to pay my debt if I came and worked for him immediately. He said I could pay it back over time. As a then 19-year-old, becoming a Pinkerton sounded like I've been working out of Chicago ever since. That was 7 years ago, and for a while I was satisfied with the work and pretty good at it too. Something happened last year, however, that has me a mite disillusioned to it all. I'm tired and weathered beyond my years, I guess. Chasing outlaws and the Apache for too long has left me callous and a bit harder than I think my mama would like. This is my last case for the Pinkertons, though. I plan to head farther south and settle down in California when I'm done. I like it out there. There's a lot of fresh air and sunshine. Crops grow real well, and I feel like if there's any good life left to be gotten after the things I've seen, that's where I'll find it. How's that for a bit more about myself? Don't worry, I've got more to tell. I just don't want to give it all away for fear you'll stop writing to me out of sheer boredom. Now, Miss Moore, we've already been through a spell of trouble together. I know how closely you guard your own reputation, and I know I can trust you with my own, which is why I don't mind telling you about the spell of mischief the stars have had me under the last fortnight. Perhaps as a woman you'll be able to shed a little light on their shenanigans. Not saying women in general get up to shenanigans, of course. You just might understand the way they think a mite better than a man. After all, I've never chased lady outlaws before, and I'd happily accept any input you might feel inclined to share. The stars have been getting a real kick out of sending me on a wild goose chase. First, they led me into the most peculiar and confounding canyon I've ever seen. It was nothing but red rock and strange totem, like pillars for as far as the eye could see. The Paiute call it, quote, Inca Timpe wa Winse Pak Ich, end quote, which I think has something to do with red rocks standing like men in a bowl-shaped ravine. Mighty accurate description if you ask me. I was lost in there encircling that bowl-shaped ravine for 3 days before I finally found my way out again. A few days later, the stars stole my horse out from under me. They ran off with her and the rest of my rig while I was getting some shut-eye in a tree. At first, I thought I had run into some trouble with the natives, but the stars always leave their mark, 3 stars forming a triangle. Who knows where I'd be if it weren't for a kindly old hermit living in a cave near the mouth of the canyon. He gave me enough food and a mule to get down to Cannonville for new supplies. The stars may have been kind to you, Miss Moore, but they've been nothing but a real pain in the derriere for me, if you'll pardon my saying so. I'm in Cannonville now. I'm posting this letter to you, and then I'll be moving on. The stars may be leading me to a piper's tune, but I'm determined to discover what they're about. So that's not the end of letter number 7, but I'm going to stop there and show you a little bit of what was in letter number 8. We had this interesting advertisement card again. And then this one is actually a recipe card for honey whole wheat bread. And then we have actually, I don't know what this is because I didn't read it yet. But I think it's something to do with I don't know. We'll have to find out. But yeah, it's interesting how, like, in every letter it's a little bit different. Like, here's a silk flower tutorial, and it's kind of interactive, so you can do that with your kids if you guys are reading this story together. I do want to apologize for any mispronunciation errors from earlier. It is quite difficult to be an audio book reader. So here's a little final flip through of what my notebook is starting to look like, and I'm really enjoying how it is coming together and how I am able to document this series of the flower letters. If you guys are enjoying this video, make sure you subscribe and stay tuned for more of these. Please let me know in the comments below how you're feeling about the flower letters, and I hope you have a beautiful day. Goodbye.